we are back with another episode of Underrated. I'm Lefty.
And I'm Bo.
You know, there's a lot going on these days, Bo.
I know, I love it.
Yeah. You know, I'd love to spend some time chatting about the MLB playoffs or the recent disaster of the international break for the U.S. women's national team. Or literally anything else. I think we've got to start off with underrated podcast recurring character Dan Snyder.
Oh gosh, Dan Snyder, always good for a good story.
Have you seen anything about him lately?
Oh yeah, I saw the news today.
Yeah. So Snyder, owner of NFL's Washington Commanders, allegedly is keeping up on other owners. In part,
Oh yeah. It's called sabotage.
Yeah. Allegedly, he has paid a team of private investigators to look into NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell and other owners in the NFL to acquire some dirt on them to keep his position.
Oh, I know.
So team officials deny this claim, but sources say that Snyder has claimed to have, quote, dirt on other owners that keep him in a safe position, saying the league, quote, can't fuck with him.
Oh my God. You know,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so at least theoretically, there appears to be some legitimacy to this, right?
Yeah,
Goodell has repeatedly predicted Snyder, brushing off reports of like the toxicity of the Washington workplace, congressional investigations, and even most recently a DEA investigation, sweeping them all under the rug, kind of allowing him to remain and maintain his tyrannical and just asinine reign.
Man.
What are your thoughts about this new Dan Snyder news?
I think my favorite quote that I read from Dan Snyder is that he said the NFL is a mafia. He said all the owners hate each other. And then another anonymous veteran owner was quoted as saying, that's not true. All the owners hate Dan.
I saw that. I have that written down to bring up as well.
Well, I think you and I would both agree. Like, I love this. I want to see this thing freaking implode, because I want to know what dirt is out there. And I want to know I want to see the real Roger Goodell come out, right? Like, I want to see this get real nasty. And I just want to see these guys, and out of desperation to, keep this clean image, what great lengths they'll go to. But I don't really know. It's so hard to say. Like, Dan Snyder is the biggest bullshit artist and one of the biggest in sports, but it's not hard for me to believe that he's got really a bunch of dirt on these other owners. I would not be shocked, right? So I want it to come out. I want this to happen.
So do you think one of the links that the NFL will go to is just allowing Jerry Jones to die so that his great name can't be tarnished?
Yeah, I think it's just time. I think it's time that we find out really what's going on behind the scenes here. And who would have thunk that it was going to be Dan Snyder, who's going to be the whistleblower of all people, but he's going to do it because, just like the rest of them, he's a dirty bastard.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite, right? You always talk about the captain going down with the ship, going down with the crew. He's the captain who's taking the ship and the crew down with him.
I mean, not only was he doing this in-house, this is like all the statements that we heard during this investigation into him, it really is true, obviously. I mean, like, you can see that there's a fear of, reprisal, within the franchise already, within the staff, all this, and now it's like, well, he's backed into a corner. So to cover himself, he's going to go to great lengths, and if I'm the other owners, I'm freaking out because I know this guy's got something on me. Absolutely.
Although I can't imagine that it's worse than anything that's on him.
Like it's like you just said. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. So like I'm burning the house down. Let's go.
Well, one thing that stood out to me in that article was how much allegedly, apparently, Jerry Jones has protected Snyder in the past, and apparently he's fallen out of favor with him. What weird bedfellows.
Right. I mean, is that how this started? Like he just got on Jerry's bad side, and he's just like, the crazy old man, and he's like, nah, saying this is not happening. I wouldn't be surprised to, for whatever reason, Roger Goodell's he's one of those Jerry Jones fanboys, in his own right. But I think everybody's in a state of paranoia because, things are happening around the world in sports right now that really haven't ever happened. People are being held accountable for their actions, and I think everyone's in a state of paranoia. I don't even think half of these owners even remember things that they've done in the past and who they are. So, I mean, whether it was via text or email, something's happening, and you probably got stuff behind the scenes. I mean, you probably got a John Gruden out there who's still PO'd.
Yeah.
That he got taken down, and so he's willing to help. It'll be interesting all the key pieces that we find out.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting time, right? As the NFL is geared towards expansion. I believe they just kind of talked about moving some games to Germany next season, and possibly even adding franchises, maybe a whole division in Europe between Germany and the UK.
Yeah.
So,
the reincarnation of NFL Europe.
It seems like an odd move, but that's again is a conversation for a different day.
For sure.
But some interesting Dan Snyder news. Be something to follow.
We'll keep our eyes on it for sure.
As much as we don't want to, we certainly will.
God.
So jumping the other side of the spectrum, it's almost NCAA basketball season. Media days are happening now. There's an article today in The Athletic that discussed ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips in a press conference yesterday calling to expand the NCAA tournament. While he claims he wants to protect mid-major automatic qualifying bids, this is clearly a ploy to allow way more mediocre Power 5 schools into the big dance.
Sure.
How do you feel about his suggestion and kind of comments that all Power 5 commissioners have made basically to change the dance into something that is basically every 500 team in every big conference gets a shot.
I think I think from their point of view, they try to market this as giving the tournament a makeover, right? Like this is going to be fresh blood for the makeover, but it also sort of takes away from, I think that excitement that is in, for me in general, March Madness is probably the most fun sports event of the year for me. I don't think really anything can match that, in my opinion, but we talked about in earlier episodes the expansion of the SEC and the Power 5. And it being really just like a Power 2 or 3 now.
Yeah, basically.
On the NCAA football side, now we're talking men's basketball now. Like, I don't, extending this out even further to almost 100 teams and schools involved.
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems crazy to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it kind of waters down how meaningful it is to the mid majors.
Right.
As you know, I attended a mid major who has a storied history in the NCAA tournament. They had a few, Cinderella upsets, and that's a super meaningful thing to a school that really doesn't focus much of its budget on athletics. And allowing another 30 teams from across the, shit conferences, like the shit teams of the biggest conferences, the 500, sure. I don't even know who finished 500 last year, but it's just not necessary, and it kind of belittles that accomplishment for all of the teams that, lost 3 games their entire season in the, whatever league, the
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, there's so much more to this too. It's like, how do you approach this tournament now with so many teams? I've heard different things like, oh, we want to see all conference champions. They get a first round bye, while the other 64 at-large teams playing the first round, and whatever the case is, I'm all the logistical stuff they can figure out. But I just think, I agree with you. I think it just takes away so much from the actual tournament. And, you and I are usually not the ones to say it's time for something to change.
Yeah.
Like, we're absolutely not those people. There's always room for improvement and, a modernization. But, I think this is structured pretty well.
Yeah, it's obviously there's probably a good path forward if they do want to expand, right? I mean, what is, doubling the size of the field is one more game for, one more round.
Right.
And that could be done, but I don't think the way to do it is the way that it will happen. If it does happen, obviously it's going to be something that, basically half the Big Ten and half the ACC and one more school in the SEC gets a bid, but at the same time, I feel like it could feasibly be done in a more thoughtful way. Maybe even second place teams in all conferences that have an automatic qualifier, right? So all of the mid-majors, they all get one more school. So
right.
But I don't think that would happen because they don't care about those schools. It's not about. It's about increasing the bottom line for those big conferences and another round of games for another 5 schools out of the ACC. It's another.
Yeah, absolutely. I just don't want there to. Right, and you don't want there to be. You don't want to take away from how meaningful it is to still win a championship, right? I mean, that should still matter. And if there's just so much access, obviously, the approach changes. It just has to. We've always got a chance, right? So, it's going to be interesting to see if this conversation continues. I mean, there's a lot of people who are for it. Obviously, there's a lot of purists, we'll call them, who are against it. Of course, Jim Boeheim has come out and said, I was talking about this 30 years ago, So we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting thing to follow. Like I said, I think that it'd just be a real disappointment for a lot of the mid-major schools, right?
Definitely.
To have that accomplishment watered down when there's no real tangible increase in benefits for them, right? I mean,
right, exactly.
In my conference, the only way to the tournament was to win the conference tournament. A team could literally lose 3 games all season, go 25-3, but if they lose that one game at the end, they're not in the tournament despite being, pretty deserving. And I don't think that the schools like that would be the ones that reap the rewards from this. So definitely something worth following.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
But let's jump into some underrated athletes. You got somebody you want to talk about today, Bo?
Yeah, Lefty, we're on the verge of the NBA regular season, so I thought no better way to start than to talk about a former NBA star, a powerhouse, arguably part of one of the most iconic NBA duos of all time, and who could probably be considered the first true power dunker of all time. Okay. So he's actually a local to you in a couple ways, Lefty. So today we're going to talk about Elkhart, Indiana native and current Seattle business owner Shawn Kemp.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so if you were an NBA fan in the early to mid 90s, there's no way you could ignore how insane of an athlete Shawn Kemp was. Now, when you think of NBA players that came straight out of high school, you think of Kobe, LeBron, Kevin Garnett, guys of that caliber. Well, Shawn Kemp, in theory, did this before them and, used that to his advantage and made an immediate impact. Although he did commit to the University of Kentucky right out of college, he failed to score the minimum of 700 on the SAT and was ineligible to play his freshman year. So he attended, but crazy enough, never set foot on the court. While he was there, he had some legal issues, unfortunately. He was actually accused of pawning a couple gold chains that belonged to his teammate, Sean Sutton, which, more importantly, was also the coach's son at the time.
Oh.
So he did choose to leave the team following that on his own accord and transferred to Trinity Valley Community College in Texas, wherever the hell that is. Kudos to you folks. You made it on this amazing podcast. But
Well, it's in Texas.
yeah, definitely. He had one semester. Also, did not play. Didn't set foot on a basketball court at any point. So, after taking the scenic route of going and attempting to go to college, he finally declared himself eligible for the 1989 NBA draft, where the Seattle Supersonics took him in the first round. So, in his first NBA season, teammate Xavier McDaniel took Kemp under his wing, and as the season progressed, so did his abilities. In his second season, he was part of a unit that included Gary Payton, Eddie Johnson, Ricky Pierce, Nate McMillan. Now, if you think about the 90s, you immediately think of the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen-led Bulls. But if you ask most NBA fans at that time and experts, there were only two other duos and teams and franchises that could match those Bulls. And that was Karl Malone, John Stockton, and the Utah Jazz, and Gary Payton, Shawn Kemp, and the Seattle Supersonics. From 1989 to 1997, Kemp's career went from being a highlight film dunker on ESPN to one of the most popular and productive athletes in the league. He was known for dunking over massive players like Hakeem Olajuwon. I mean, that made for, great poster material on a lot of bedroom walls, Lefty. So in 1994, Kemp played for the U.S. national team. He won a gold medal. In 95 to 96, his career reached a pinnacle. Not only did he and Peyton lead the team to a franchise record 64 wins, they made their first NBA Finals appearance since 1979, the Seattle Supersonics, and they took on Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Now, most importantly in the finals, for Kemp, he posted per-game averages of 23.3 points on 55% shooting from the field, 10 rebounds and 2 blocks through the NBA Finals. They ended up losing in 6 games to Chicago, but even crazier, Kemp almost won the Finals MVP award. Had he won, he would have only been the second player in NBA history to win that award, being on the losing team.
Wow.
So,
it's an impressive showing.
I mean, that's how dominant he was, playing against a team that was basically immortalized at that time. So, Kemp was finally traded to the Cavaliers after the 96-97 season. But that was after once again leading his team to a 50-plus win season. Unfortunately, and it sounds crazy, but this is where a lot of the notoriety began. He struggled with weight issues in his first season with the Cavaliers, and his hunger for the game seemed to be in question all the time. But despite this, he posted career-high numbers in some categories and helped lead the Cavs to the playoffs. So, in the lockout-shortened 98-99 season, he reportedly showed up to camp weighing nearly 300 pounds. Cleveland's then GM, Wayne Embry, claimed he was actually 315 pounds. Other sources say at some point he got up to nearly 400 pounds. Who really knows? But still, over 3 years, Kemp averaged nearly 21 points per game and 9.2 rebounds for the Cavaliers. So, he was traded to the Portland Trail Blazers after the 99-2000 season, and his play just started to decline significantly. The last few years of Kemp's professional basketball career were riddled with problems stemming from his weight, as well as drug and alcohol abuse. His first season in Portland ended early when he entered drug rehab. Prior to the 02-03 season, he was waived by the Trailblazers and signed with the Orlando Magic, and really just saw a quiet end to his career. Now, over the next few years, he tried to make several comebacks in the NBA, but nothing ever came to fruition. He struggled with the drugs and the alcohol and the legal issues, and just shockingly enough, at age 39, he did make a comeback. He appeared in 3 preseason games in the Italian League, and he looked to be in outstanding shape and had made quite the turnaround. But, let's take an overall look at Kemp. He accumulated 15,000 points and 9,000 rebounds, 6 All-Star trips. He made an NBA Finals appearance like we talked about. He almost won an Finals MVP award, and he was playing on a losing team. he's considered probably one of the greatest dunkers of all time. You know, at the end of his career, he averaged 20.9 points, 10.4 rebounds, 2 blocks per game. You know, the Supersonics had the NBA's third best record during Kemp's 8 years with the franchise, behind only the Bulls and the Utah Jazz. He brought a type of power and flair that is more common in today's NBA, but was rarely seen during that time in league history. You know, like Giannis style power and strength, obviously. But so much as this has been hampered by the last years of his career and his personal life. You know, I don't think the argument here is whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame, Lefty. It's that for years this man struggled with addiction while still performing at an extremely high level somehow. You know, there are only a few people in the city of Seattle's basketball history, Gary Payton, Jack Sikma, don't forget Sue Bird, that can be remembered like Shawn Kemp can. You know, a few years ago, a poll came out showing his Hall of Fame probability was around 40%. That's what, you know, the experts had thought. But, you know, is he just a guy who is good for highlight reels but never really great? Or is this a case of basketball writers only wanting to talk about people that give them the, you know, the feels? You know, is Shawn Kemp underrated?
You know, I think that, Shawn Kemp is absolutely underrated. I think that, you know, he was definitely, you know, one of the best athletes in Supersonics history. And, you know, during the height of his career when he made those 6 straight All-Star games, you know, he was one of the best players in the league. He, you know, wasn't the most flashy scorer. Obviously, he had, you know, the highlight reel dunks, but he never put up insane numbers. But one thing I wanted to talk about is I think he's a truly underrated rebounder. He's pretty prolific there. Definitely. I think he's just behind, you know, Hall of Famer David Robertson in all-time rebounds. So definitely someone who had, you know, flashes of you know, really great stuff. And you know, talking about his struggles with both weight and addiction, it kind of harkens back to another Indiana Mr. Basketball. I guess Kemp was runner-up, but, you know, another recent Indiana Mr. Basketball, you know, Caleb Swanigan, who, you know, we can see on the other end of the spectrum a player who, you know, was pretty similar in play style and drive and motivation, but just wasn't able to overcome those same demons. So, you know, when it comes to Kemp, like, definitely an underrated player, and a player that should be celebrated not just for, you know, being a phenomenal player, but also, you know, working through those struggles and, you know, really coming out on top. Definitely. I think, you know, the conversation that's always had about Shawn Kemp is he's one of the best Seattle Supersonics ever, but it's never, you know, he has a place in, you know, in the books. He's in with the elite names, you know, but what we do on this show is we talk about what a player gives to the game, maybe on and off the court. In this case, he electrified the game. No one was doing, as far as power goes, what he was doing at that time. I mean, he was extremely gifted. And you talked about rebounds. What's understated about Shawn Kemp always in every conversation is that he had an all-around great game. I think there's a lot of confusion there where people say, well, you know, he's very limited in his abilities. This man came out of high school looking like a Greek god. He was a bona fide, pure athlete, and he was able to dominate on the court. And, you know, even if you look back and you take a look, some people consider, like I said, a team like the Chicago Bulls to be flawless in so many ways. To watch a man like that in the NBA Finals still be able to dominate when he got the ball, it's incredible. It's a feat that you don't often see, right? And it's okay to say, you know, he was able to compete at a level like Karl Malone and, you know, his counterparts like that. But again, his name is always kind of left off the list. And I think later on in life, I think, you know, his legacy, it's become a bit tarnished because of how the media, you know,
works with information like that,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We've seen this so often where people are human beings. The long and short of it is that, he struggled. He had an issue. He tried to help himself. I mean, now he's made his comeback and he's recovered and he's doing well. And like I said, for the game at that time, Shawn Kemp was just an electric player, and he was someone to always watch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I also found interesting is just how productive he was from the free throw line. When you think about big men like him, getting hacked, and that was the era of the hack-a-shack, right?
For sure.
He was actually good at shooting free throws.
Definitely.
He actually finished his career with 12 more points from the line than other Supersonics Hall of Famer Jack Sikma that you mentioned.
Right, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, 64th all-time in NBA history when it comes to points from the line. So, I mean, pretty productive there. And productive, like you said, all around the game. Obviously, some things stand out more. I think his rebounding is something that's highly underrated. And I think, again, we've talked about this a lot. I think a lot of the athletes we cover are players that would be way more successful in other eras. I think at that time, he kind of straddled the size gap, right? I mean, we talked about it with Rasheed Wallace.
Right.
Players that aren't that 7 foot mark, that get kind of sandwiched into the center role, or play a power forward role that almost more mimics the center role. In that era, just kind of struggled from production because they weren't able to be utilized in a way that they would be now. Yeah,
absolutely, man. Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. Like I said, part of an NBA duo that was pretty legendary. I mean, you had Gary Payton, who was just an absolute menace out there all the time. One of the league's biggest all-time trash talkers and annoyances. Outstanding player. And then you had him on the other side as just a hammer. I mean, he was a true power, right? But no, absolutely. I'd like to see Shawn Kemp included in a lot of these conversations. I'm not sure if he'll obviously how it'll turn out for him, but there's so many great players out there. But as far as recognition goes, I think he kind of falls on the back burner for a lot of folks in these discussions. So
absolutely.
Definitely. Well, we both agree that
underrated.
Shawn Kemp is underrated.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with another potentially underrated athlete. And we are back. So, Bo, I know that you're not very active on Twitter.
Yeah,
but
that's a fact, right?
If you had been paying attention to my personal page this week, you might have got a good idea who I'm going to be talking about today after I posted about a surprise pair of NFL draft picks by the same team in the year 2000.
Wow.
That year, the Oakland Raiders used their first and fifth round picks on two specialists who would go on to be one of the best kicking and punting batteries in NFL history, in Shane Lechler and Sebastian Janikowski.
Yes.
Today, I'd like to talk about one of those picks, punter Shane Lechler.
Shane Lechler. All right, let's do it.
Yeah, we all know that punters and kickers get no love.
Right.
And many consider Shane Lechler to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. But I think Lechler deserves a bit of a deeper dive. So we're currently in a bit of a punting renaissance. There are more, training camps, online courses, and general philosophy changes that are undergoing this rapid leap forward in the last few years when it comes to punting. Colleges now take punters in every recruiting cycle. Players from Australia currently are dominating the Big Ten right now. Every team has some Australian punter who can kick it 90 yards.
That's right.
And some schools even have specific punters for specific situations, like a long kicker and then another specialist punter who, just boots short punts out at the 1 yard line.
Right.
But before all of that, Shane Lechler broke the mold and figured out how to be a successful punter that the league had never seen before all on his own.
Right.
He was a quarterback punter and place kicker in high school, and then attended Texas A&M from 1996 to 1999.
Oh, yeah.
Despite kicking off, handling long field goals, and even acting as the Aggies' emergency QB, Lechler immediately made a name for himself as a punter. After his 1996 freshman season, he earned freshman All-American honors on the heels of a 42.7-yard punting average. As a sophomore, he increased that average to 47 yards per punt, breaking the Texas A&M record. To contextualize, that 47-yard average basically would have put him middle of the pack in the 2021 NFL. So, at 19 years old, in college, in 1997, he was already kicking at a 2021 NFL level.
That's pretty. That's called innovation right there.
Exactly.
He was an innovator.
Yeah, exactly. That season, he was named an All-American and was named to the All-Conference team. And all said in college, he was named to 3 All-American teams his sophomore, junior, and senior season, and was all Big 10, or all Big 12, sorry, for those final 3 years in college as well. Mm-hmm. And in 2000, the Oakland Raiders drafted Lechler in the 5th round, notably being the only punter drafted that year and getting drafted ahead of Tom Brady as a punter in the 5th round.
Wow.
It's just remarkable that the Oakland Raiders drafted a kicker in the 1st round in Janikowski and a punter in the 5th round.
Right, exactly.
In Lechler, and that they both turned out to be phenomenal picks. Like, it was the least Raiders-like picks they could have made, and that they were both successful.
Maybe I think Al Davis was asleep that day. Had to be.
He was just dreaming of a future.
Right, on the flip side, it's a very Al Davis thing to do, to just do something bizarre like this, but for it to work out, that's different.
Yeah, he was asleep that day dreaming of Jamarcus Russell.
Exactly.
So, once in the NFL in 2000, he immediately dazzled. That season, he punted 65 times for nearly 3,000 yards and was named a first-team All-Pro as a rookie. The following season, he cracked that 3,000-yard mark, ticked up his average yards per punt, and was named to his first Pro Bowl. After a down season in 2002, Lechler came back in 2003 with a vengeance. He led the league with over 4,500 yards of punting and a punting average of 46.9 yards, and had the longest punt in the NFL that season of 73 yards, again being named first-team All-Pro.
Crazy.
That 2003 season started a run that would see him lead the league in yards 3 times, be selected to 4 Pro Bowls, be named to 4 All-Pro teams, and lead the league in punting average 5 times in 7 years.
Wow.
That level of dominance from the punting position was absolutely unheard of and far surpassed anything accomplished by the other former legendary Oakland Raiders punter, Ray Guy.
Ray Guy.
So all told, in Oakland, he played 13 seasons, punted for 48,000 yards with a 47.5-yard average. During his Raiders stint, he was named to 9 All-Pro teams and 7 Pro Bowls. Those accolades would be impressive for any position, but are just truly unheard of for a punter.
Yeah.
Longevity doesn't jive with that position. Punters don't last in the league for 13 years. But Lechler went on to play another 5 more seasons in Houston, punting for 20,000 more yards, raising his career average, punting longer in the twilight of his career than he did earlier. And in his last season, at the age of 41, Shane led the league with 4,500 yards and averaged 49 yards per kick.
Crazy.
So, at the time of his retirement in 2017, and to this day, Lechler ranks first all-time in NFL punting average, second in career punts, and second in punt yards, as well as being 5th all-time in punts blocked, only allowing 5 blocked punts in 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah, like 1 every 3 years.
Exactly. That's crazy.
So according to Pro Football Reference, the Pro Football Reference Hall of Fame monitor, Lechler is the best punter of all time, having to score 20% higher than the next highest punter, Ray Guy. And with all of those accolades, it's pretty hard to think that Lechler is underrated, right? Right? But I'm not so sure. Punters get very little respect, and they get even less respect when they play on absolutely horrible teams like the Oakland Raiders and the Houston Texans.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed.
So in 17 years over his career, Lechler only played in 10 playoff games and only made one Super Bowl, and that was a loss in 2003.
That's right.
That lack of national recognition, plus playing his best seasons on the West Coast, really kept Lechler out of the mind of most NFL fans. Just a few weeks back, Lechler was named a nominee for the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
But despite being truly and unambiguously the greatest punter of all time, it seems increasingly unlikely that Lechler will get inducted to the Hall of Fame this time round. After all, it took Ray Guy, the other punter in Canton, the only punter in Canton, 23 years after his initial eligibility to get inducted. And that came on the back of 3 Super Bowl rings.
Yeah.
Specialists are rarely considered in the same tier as, position players, non-specialist.
Right.
Lechler has an uphill battle. But again, is unambiguously the best punter ever to play in the NFL.
That's right.
With more accolades than I could list in one breath, and an unclear road to the Hall of Fame. Do you think Shane Lechler is underrated?
Well, you know what, Lefty? I love this pick. Shane Lechler, in my mind, is first ballot Hall of Famer, without a doubt. I think that in itself, I understand that it's very hard for the voters to take a look at a punter and say, oh yeah, but his numbers exceed Ray Guy, and I think when you're in a situation like that, what's the play? I absolutely think that because he was a special teams player, he was underappreciated, for a lot of reasons. Now, I want to say this: Shane Lechler's 6'2", 240 pounds. This guy was the size of a linebacker. Okay, very agile, and not to mention, I mean, he kicked more than 1,400 punts in his career. I mean, he didn't retire to the age of 42, I believe it was, right?
Yeah.
I think looking at accolades, 7-time Pro Bowler, 6-time first-team All-Pro, things like that. He's on a couple all-decade teams. That punt record is absurd. He has NFL career record of 47.6 average yards per punt. That is just mind-blowing. And, the last time I checked, when you're good at something and you're really good and you're the all-time greatest, you should feel that respect. But I just don't think he's really ever gotten that. I think after a while, people came accustomed to it, and it was just something that they expected, right?
Yeah.
With Ray, it's funny, obviously a former Raider. Ray Guy, obviously, I mean, we talked about the numbers. He exceeds that. I think that, Shane Lechler played at a time where we didn't have any, technology really on the field, for the most part. I mean, there was no film study for him to avoid being, blocked and returned for a touchdown on a regular basis was pretty outstanding, I think, I absolutely believe, special teams. I mean, guys, I think we had Devin Hester recently with the Chicago Bears.
Yeah,
one of the all-time greatest kick returners still, not really appreciated in what he did, right?
There's been a similar conversation about, I think he became eligible for the Hall of Fame last year, I believe it was, maybe 2 years ago. And again, those specialist traits aren't something that many people acknowledge, especially Hall of Fame voters.
Absolutely. But really think about it too. Why is this so important? Why is the position so important? Well, field position is constantly of importance, right? He played, on a team that, obviously had Jerry Rice and Tim Brown and Rich Gannon and guys like that. But putting them in position to be successful was a constant. The role that he played was just as important, So, if you look back at it again, the Raiders, what a crazy year, right? To have 2, special teams players of that caliber in Janikowski and Lechler. I mean, I don't know how you could be so lucky, but overall, from college until he retired, I think that it isn't the flashy position. It isn't, it isn't something that people strive to do. When they want to become players, but he was a multi-tooled athlete, like you had mentioned. The versatility, he could play quarterback. I mean, in his prep career, we talked about it. He threw for 5,000 yards, right? And he was punting, and as a teenager, he was punting nearly 90 yards. This is, I absolutely believe that Shane Lechler is underrated, and man, I hope they don't play this game of waiting as long to give this man, a gold jacket. That would be a sad story, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's likely that in the near future, his accomplishments will be, overridden. Somebody will pass him because so much effort is being put into special teams now by coaches and players. And I think that with that adjustment, maybe we'll see more recognition of those players, those special teams players. And like you said, I think that he didn't play in the dark ages, right? I mean, there was still film study and stuff.
Sure.
But there wasn't the internet
earlier
in his career in the same way that we know it today. There's no young kids were looking up Shane Lechler highlights on YouTube in 2006.
Right, exactly.
And I think that might hurt him too, not having that kind of brand exposure. But like I said, I think he'll probably get surpassed at some point in the next decade or two. And I don't think he'll probably be upset about that because the game has changed and he helped promote that change.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, definitely somebody that I agree is underrated.
100%.
I said, unambiguously the best punter ever to play.
Exactly.
And one
Ask anyone. Ask anyone. Pat McAfee, guys like that. They'll talk to, other punters and special teams players will tell you this is the greatest punter of all time, and it's pretty crazy that they still have to make a case for it.
Yeah, and just thinking about the evolution, right? Since Ray Guy was inducted, since he played, it's become a science. It's become about the quick release, the adjustment of hips and everything. I was just doing some quick math here. We'd both mentioned his only 5 blocked punts in 17 years.
Right.
Two of those came in his first 2 seasons. So from 2002 until he retired in 2017, he had a punt blocked once every 435 attempts. Which is just
wow.
Just insane.
It is. It's crazy.
It's just, it had me thinking about how the last Raider, I believe, to be inducted to the Hall of Fame was Charles Woodson last year.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think that, Shane Lechler giving the defense a more lucrative field position, penning the other team back, probably definitely helped Charles Woodson, with his career numbers. When you think about how much overlap they had, when you put that much pressure on an opposing quarterback, they're bound to make more mistakes.
Right.
And I don't know if there are actually numbers to back this up, but I would assume that Shane Lechler's punting definitely contributed to a sizable chunk of Charles Woodson's production.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, we, not to go too deep into it, but just to compare to another, Devin Hester we were talking about, how many times did Rex Grossman and guys like Kyle Orton, benefit from Devin Hester's field position because these were not elite quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
These were teams that needed to have an opportunity and put points on the board.
He absolutely helped carry them to that Super Bowl.
100%, and exactly, it's just one of those situations, underappreciation for an awesome athlete.
Absolutely. So we agree. Shane Lechler, underrated.
Hell yeah.
But we've got a lot of current events too happening, right? We're in the MLB playoffs.
Yeah, man. what about those MLB playoffs? Some surprises, right?
Yeah,
Jeez.
we just had one game rained out today.
Yeah.
But, both NL series are tied, game apiece. The Astros just pulled off another comeback because, of course, they did.
Yordan Alvarez.
It's
What
pretty
can you say, man?
It's pretty wild, living in Seattle, seeing so many folks talk about how unexpected that comeback was the other day, as if like 3 days prior they also didn't score 8 runs in an inning in the most improbable and unlikely comeback of all time.
Right, exactly.
Do you have any predictions from where we're at?
We talked about it on the last episode, I believe. I think we're both, but I don't see the Mariners coming back from this. They may take a game here or so, but I think Houston's got this one, obviously.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I think Cleveland has a chance to surprise some folks here.
Yeah.
I do. I feel like, they might just shake this up a little bit. On the NL side, though, as much as people would like it to happen, I still think, the Braves are going to come out. But, man, Dodgers and Houston. I don't see it going any other way, really. I know that's the boring pick, but, I just think that's going to happen,
Yeah, absolutely. I really do think that the Phillies have a chance here. I really think Cleveland has a chance, but I don't want them to win out of principle, not because they're like a rival of the White Sox or
right.
An AL Central foe, but because giving success to teams that lose on purpose is bad for baseball.
Right. It's
bad for the game. It's bad for the sport, and I don't want to see it happen.
Right, especially for Cleveland, who has been in a situation to win so many times and have purposely put themselves in a position to start all over again from scratch, and then have been bad and just wanted to get worse. Like you said, definitely, I'm surprised by the Phillies. I really am. Like, I know the talent was there, but I got to applaud that team for just the comeback that they've made, the second half of the season after getting rid of probably the future coach of the White Sox. Just, seeing that team just really turn around was pretty outstanding, man. And, like we've talked about, and say whatever you want, but there's a lot of internal drama there. I mean, you're pretty familiar with Alex Boehm's, comments, before the season started. I don't know if you remember that, but he talked about how he hated Philadelphia.
I remember earlier, was there a game where he made a couple of errors and he was seen on field mouthing some bad talk about how much he hates Philly?
Exactly. He just was not happy, and to be able to turn it around, has been good. And obviously seeing Bryce Harper, obviously.
Yeah. So that was my next question, actually, right? He won MVP last year. He won a World Series 2018 with the Nationals.
Yeah.
If he leads this Phillies team even just to another World Series,
right,
how much do you think that cements his legacy?
I think it cements his legacy. I mean, I think as it stands right now, he's a Hall of Famer. I'll be honest. I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely phenomenal and he's on that trajectory.
Right.
But I still think he's wildly underappreciated across the league.
Yeah, but I think both you and I agree that's just a lot of old hatred. I think that's a lot of BS. I think there's a lot of things that people just want to hate about Bryce Harper and ignore the sheer talent of this guy. Just like you said, based on principle, right? I don't want to like him, but no, what he brings to a team is is so meaningful. You can't really put You can't really put your finger on it other than saying, hey, listen, it's energy, it's statistics, and it's just, he's a great all-around player. I'm glad to see that he's, recurringly, in some sort of race and actually playing. It's not going in vain. Like, we've seen some other great players.
Yeah, it's remarkable. He's not even 30 yet. He'll turn 30 just in a couple of days. But
man, we could see another 10 years of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the hate directed towards him, I think people forget how young he is, right? He had all of this hate strewn his way basically from the time he was drafted when he was 17. He was so hyped up, even before he was drafted at 15, 16.
Right.
And then getting drafted at 17, like, you gotta feel a little sympathy for him. I feel like a lot of his actions came as a result of being a literal child, but also, when you're raised in that environment, right? His formative years happened
growing up
as,
in front
as
of
a professional. Yeah.
Right. You're growing up, and you're going to have growing pains, right? It should. Everyone, you're right. It's a great point. You have to remember that we're talking about a teenager. So I mean, and a young man, and we're all going to make mistakes, and things happen. And but again, you've got so many people out there who just didn't like the way he played the game, and it's just, you're always going to have that out there. It's just like, I don't like he's too emotional, he's too this, he's too that. It's like, just get over it. These are the same people who didn't want to, they don't want anyone to show any emotion out there. So that's a lot of that.
That reminds me, pivoting to another player that has had some opinions about how other people play the game. How do you feel about Josh Donaldson not running out a home run, getting thrown out?
Right.
Is that an all-time 2022 postseason moment for you?
Right, exactly. God, he just needs to go away, man.
Yeah.
Like, statistically, what is the value that he brings anymore to anything? I mean, he had a few awesome seasons. And,
I mean, he put up the same value as Bryce Harper this year.
Really?
Yeah, mostly because Bryce Harper has been hurt all year, right?
Right.
But still,
Bryce Harper had to miss 7 weeks, and but I don't know. I mean, it's just like,
talk about a guy that going into when he was Bryce Harper's age, he looked like he was another player that could have been on that Hall of Fame trajectory, but injuries and not hustling.
Racism.
Hustling.
Okay. Not hustling.
One other current event I wanted to talk to you about. I know you're a pretty big hockey fan.
Yeah.
It's the start of the NHL season. Some teams have already played a game. The rest will pretty soon. You have any predictions for this season? Anything you're looking forward to?
Obviously, I'm looking forward to the St. Louis Blues competing at a higher level. I think that there's a couple teams that are going to really just make things pretty tough. The Dallas Stars again. Obviously they had some breakout athletes in last year's Stanley Cup playoffs. So I think they're really going to make things a little tough. The Avalanche are going to be in it, as they are and have been, here and there. But
do you think they have a chance to repeat?
I think they have a chance. Yeah, I do. I think it'll be a little bit more difficult this time around. I think a team that has always been kind of on the verge of just trying to get over the hump is a team like the New York Islanders. I feel like they've kind of fluctuated. They've taken a step back. They've taken a step forward, another 2 steps back. I feel like they're on the verge of trying to get over that hump there too. But one team I can't take away from is I think the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Tampa Bay Lightning are going to be still dominant. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I didn't keep up with the NHL hot stove as much as I would have liked to, but it's great to have hockey back. I will say that.
Yeah.
Are you going to be a Kraken fan now that you've relocated?
I'm still reeling over the loss of the California Golden Seals. So maybe when I come out of mourning for that franchise. That I'm not a huge NHL fan, but over the years I've developed affinities for a couple of squads. I loved watching the Twins of Vancouver. I thought that was a fun era. And more recently I got into watching the Minnesota Wild. So I think I might go to a Kraken game this year, but I'm going to stick with the Wild. I think they've got an outside shot at a Stanley Cup. I think that I don't watch enough hockey to confidently pronounce names, but I think that Karprazov, is that his name?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that he is a bona fide star and could be the best player in the NHL this year.
Definitely.
He could lead them to the promised land.
Absolutely. I think taking a look at the upcoming season, obviously the Avalanche are the favorites to repeat. Carolina Hurricanes are up there. They're being picked to be pretty competitive. Again, with the Lightning, Edmonton, Florida. I think a big name in hockey now every year is Connor McDavid, right?
Yeah.
Just to see what he's going to be able to do. Watching him out there, just an electric player. But we also have some big names that have made moves. A guy like Matthew Tkachuk, who's with the Panthers now, just to see what kind of impact he has on that organization. And, again, I think that even a team like the Rangers, the New York Rangers, that have come a long way. I think, again, it's pretty exciting. It's sort of a free-for-all. And, I don't want to make too many strong predictions, but, I think I would love to see the St. Louis Blues and the Carolina Hurricanes in the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that'd be an exciting one.
Yeah, I would love to see it, man. So, I'll go ahead and say that as of today, those are my two picks for the Stanley Cup as we start the season. But we'll see how it plays out.
I'll write those down.
Definitely.
One last question for you. I'm going to put you on the spot. You can also just not answer it if you don't know. But as you know, or might not know, the NWSL playoffs start this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
We got 2 games happening on Sunday.
Okay.
The quarterfinals. Houston Dasher taking on Kansas City. San Diego Wave are playing the Chicago Red Stars. Do you have any predictions?
Oh, my gosh. That's a tough one, man. How about we say this? What are your predictions? How about that?
I think that Houston Dash and Kansas City is going to be a tough matchup. I think it's pretty even at the moment, but I think Kansas City edges. I also think the Red Stars come out on top, despite just sneaking into the playoffs and, San Diego having a shot at, finishing first overall before kind of fumbling the bag in the last game. They've got a thin squad right now. They're missing Alex Morgan and Taylor Korniak, so I'm going with the Red Stars. So,
all right,
for this first round. So
there you have it, folks.
So do some research, and I'll ask you the same question next week.
You got it. I'll be ready this time. There you go.
All right, that's all we've got for today. Again, you can listen to this episode and every episode on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever podcasts can be found. You can follow us on YouTube at Underrated Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Underrated Pod. That's at _rated_pod. And you can follow us now on TikTok at Underrated Pod, where we have a booming following, apparently.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All the young folks.
That's right. All the young folks are out there. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and be sure to check out the Patreon too. Patreon.com/underratedpod. Until next time.